Okay, out of your mind. What is this all about? Let's find out. So, the first thing I want to say is that there is an explosion going on out there in society, something that's been happening very exciting and has a lot to do with Buddhism. And what exactly are we talking about? I'm talking about the mindfulness revolution. You can't turn anywhere anymore. At the check stand at the grocery store, there's books, there's all kinds of programs. People are talking about mindfulness all the time now. We even have a mindfulness reading in our service book. I didn't hear about mindfulness till probably about 15 years ago when I kind of first came back to OCBC, and one of my friends who goes down to Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery down in Escondido was talking about mindfulness. And it was the first time that my ears kind of perked up when I heard that. But now we hear and see it everywhere. For example, here are Newsweek and Time Magazine, both doing articles about spirituality and mindfulness, because obviously they're very connected. And we'll explore that a little today. When I did a search on Amazon for mindfulness, these are all the topics that came up. Mindfulness in plain English, mindfulness for kids, mindfulness journal, mindfulness for beginners, mindfulness therapy games, mindfulness matters, mindfulness and acceptance workbook for anxiety, mindfulness-based stress reduction workbook. There were 22 pages of mindfulness entries, each page holding actually 20 pages of 22 entries each for 440 mindfulness items. And that's just for mindfulness. So there are mindfulness books for children and workbooks and games. Here we have mindfulness for kids, 50 mindfulness activities, breathe and be, sitting still like a frog. And of course, there's many, many mindfulness books for adults. Mindfulness cards, practicing mindfulness. Mindfulness for the mindless. That might be me. So it's also in media. And I'm going to maybe recall some older movies, but they also show aspects of mindfulness. How many of you remember Karate Kid? Okay, I know all of my high school students were born after this movie was made. So that's really dating me. This movie comes from 1984. In fact, one of my children, I only had one son at that point. So that was a long time ago. But this is a great movie. And I would encourage Dharma School students to watch this movie. It has some great messages, very entertaining. And of course, Mr. Miyagi is an iconic person. In one of the segments of this movie, Daniel's complaining to Mr. Miyagi. He goes, "My whole life is getting out of focus." And Mr. Miyagi says to him very calmly, "When you feel life out of focus, always turn to basic of life." And then he folds his hands calmly in front of him. So Daniel turns to him and says, "What, praying?" Mr. Miyagi says, "Breathing." Then we have this movie, another old movie, a little bit older, from 1993, Groundhog Day. How many of the parents remember this movie? Okay, for Dharma School students, this is a movie where the main character, Phil, is a man who keeps waking up over and over to the same day. It's Groundhog Day. And he wakes up to the same day for years. He can't get out of this cycle of being in the same day. And in the beginning, he's really angry because every day he wakes up, he thinks it's going to be the next day, but it's the same day over and over and over again. So in the beginning, he's a weatherman. He's very self-centered. He's always trying to scheme and try to, kind of connive people. He was not a very honest human being. But because he's forced to live the same day over and over and over again, he knows what's going to happen. And so he can anticipate when something's going to happen because he's been there a gazillion times before. And over time, he becomes kind of unstuck in his former way of living. And he's forced to live intensely and in the present because he finds that that's all I'm going to have is this moment right now. He finds compassion, he finds kindness, he finds love, and he finds a way to be and connect to people in a way that he never would have if he didn't have this opportunity to keep living the same day over and over. It's a good movie to see again, particularly for young people. It's a movie you might be interested in watching for the first time. So of course, then we have Star Wars. Yes, and Yoda. Oh, don't we all love Yoda? And who is more mindful than Yoda? No one. You're right. He says things like, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And he tells frustrated Luke Skywalker, tries to guide him, explains to him what the Force is. And for me, watching the Star Wars movie, the Force always reminded me of what I think of as Amida. He says the Force is all around us, supporting us, helping us, making our life possible. And so in some ways, or sometimes, I try to use the description of the Force as a way for us to kind of explain what Amida is, because I think we can connect to what that idea is through Star Wars. I think Lucas did a wonderful job incorporating many Buddhist ideas. He consulted with Joseph Campbell, who is a great spiritual hero of mine, who also really admired Buddhism and Buddhist thoughts. And so George Lucas used a lot of those ideas in Star Wars. So there's a lot of kind of Buddhist messages in there. So he helps Luke kind of understand and to be very present. Now, I don't do any clips because one of the problems we have with putting our Dharma talks on YouTube is that we have copyright issues. And the other factor is that I don't know how to do movie clips. So you have to imagine these things. So let's ask the question, what is mindfulness? We've heard a lot about it. It's pervasive in our society. People are always kind of talking about it. We talk about it here at OCBC. And let's try to explore that a little bit. Here's two ideas of what mindful could be. If you're a child, you might think mindful means that you've got a mind that's full, like the illustration up there on the left. A mind that's just chock full with ideas and crammed full of things, and that's like many of us. Our heads are so full that we really can't be mindful because our mind is too full. On the left side is more of the idea of what we're trying to achieve with this idea of mindfulness. Some sense of serenity, some sense of calm, some sense of peace in our lives. So what does that really mean? Well, mindfulness to me means really paying attention and being very present, being very much in the now. Now, that doesn't mean you don't think about your future, you don't make plans, you don't think about the past and kind of reminisce and memories or have regret. But if you do those things too much in the past, too much in the future, then you really are missing what you have right in this instant, in this moment. And that's what mindfulness wants to do, is to keep you in this moment, to pay attention and to be present. I want to show you this quote that I have from one of my teachers, Greg Creech, who actually has been to OCBC as a speaker. He's the director of the Nikon Institute in Vermont. He has retreats. And his Nikon therapy is based on Shin Buddhism. And it is very much a gratitude practice. But I had this quote: "Your experience of life is not what happens, but what you pay attention to." I actually had this quote pasted up above my desk in my house for years and years and years on a little sticky note. And finally, my husband said, maybe it's time to take that thing down, because it just was there forever. So I did finally take it down, but it still is inside of me. I still remember this quote, and it is still an important part of how I try to look at my life. Another important teacher is Sonan Kubose, who wrote the book Bright Dawn. And he spends a lot of time talking about his gasho practice. He in his book Bright Dawn, he talks about how when he lived in Chicago, he would take this morning run, and he takes you in the book through his morning run, and he starts with waking up and going to the bathroom and tying his shoes, and each of those moments are gasho moments. He even says that going to the bathroom is a gasho moment, because if you aren't able to go to the bathroom, you would die. Your body being able to eliminate is really important. So he is very present. All the aspects of his morning run he thinks about, is very present. He thanks his shoes, which is something that his father was very noted for. His father, Gilme Kubose, was somebody who always told Dharma school children, thank your shoes every morning, because your shoes protect your feet and they make you able to run and to do all kinds of things. But Reverend Kubose talked about being aware and grateful for all these things that are in your life that support and help you, that we take for granted. He says for all of us, we should say gasho to our washing machine, because it helps us in so many ways. So you can think of many ways that you can be very mindful. Okay, so what does mindfulness have to do with Buddhism? Well, in Buddhism, we want to answer this very important question: who am I? And that is really the Buddhist inquiry, going deep inside, and mindfulness is a way for us to access that. As Buddhists, we want to really see, who am I? And if you're distracted and thinking about too many other things, not being mindful, not looking inside and really questioning or thinking about who this person is inside, then you're not paying attention to your life. Shakyamuni Buddha was the first one who really brought attention to this. I think mindfulness and introspection has always been an important part of all spiritual practices, but Shakyamuni Buddha made it a very core aspect of what we do as Buddhists. And then a very important part of mindfulness, of course, is something called meditation. And then I asked the question, why meditation? Because meditation really isn't traditionally a part of Shin Buddhism. And so we have to ask, what would Shinran Shonin say? There are people and ministers in ECA who don't really like the idea of doing meditation. We here at OCBC have embraced it from the very beginning. We felt that our minds are so cluttered, we have so many distractions, that we really need to use meditation. And it helps with the Shin Buddhist journey. Our emphasis is on things like deep listening and trusting in Amida Buddha, saying the Nembutsu in gratitude. And the Shinjin experience is one in which I recognize my deeply flawed, imperfect self, and yet Buddhahood, enlightenment, awakening is still available for me. And so a mindfulness meditation practice helps us to do that. And this is often our condition. I love this cartoon. This little character is going, who, what, where, when, how, why, which, how much, how many, how long, how far, what for, what next, then what, why me? That's kind of our condition. And I love his dog. That's why we have dogs. They are very much in the present. But this illustrates, I think, because our lives are so much different than 13th century Japan when Shinran Shonin was alive and promulgating his teaching. We are not the same as pre-modern Japan. We are not the same as the way farmers and fishermen and people who were mostly illiterate lived in that time. Our lives are so much more complex, so much more involved, that we need a way to calm ourselves, a way to sort of decompress. And I think meditation is a wonderful way to experience mindfulness. I think you take meditation practice and it allows you to live a more mindful life. So at this point, I want to give you a little lesson on the Weekly Wheel podcast, which has been up for about 2 months. It was started by Jim Scott, who is a member of OCBC. He has put up this podcast, which basically you can access through your phone. I'm going to do this on the computer, and I'm going to instruct you on how you might want to engage in the Weekly Wheel podcast, which is basically a meditation practice. So I've got to get out of here. Then, okay, this is the OCBC website, and that's some of our adorable OCBC children. And what you do is scroll down until you get to this podcast figure, and you click on that. And then it'll take you to something called the Weekly Wheel. And then you just scroll down. There's, 10, 12 episodes. And I'm going to choose episode 001. And we're going to listen to this for 5 minutes, and that'll be the end of my Dharma talk. So, and you'll recognize the people on it.
Welcome to our meditation service podcast. Each week we will have a different presentation, including different sutra chanting, different speakers, and different Dharma messages. Through this meditation service program, we will have both seated and standing meditation, sutra chanting, and a Dharma message. We hope that this meditation service podcast will enable the listener to experience meditation, to experience sutra chanting, and to listen to a Dharma message. In our Shin Buddhist tradition, we regard meditation as not a practice or as a means to try to attain enlightenment, but we are simply sitting to calm ourselves so that we might better receive the Dharma, hear the Dharma. Our everyday life is so hectic and fast-paced and busy, and we need a little bit of quiet time, tranquility. We find it hard to focus on listening to a message, and so by sitting first, we're able to settle ourselves, calm ourselves, and open our hearts and minds to receive the teaching. Once we learn how to receive the teachings in a meditation service, we find that we're able to receive the teachings even in our everyday life. We encounter teachers anywhere. Could be a driver, could be a bartender, could be your pet cat or dog that gives you a teaching relevant to your life. Thank you.
We will begin with sitting meditation. Find yourself a comfortable place to sit, either in a chair or on the floor. On the floor, you may prefer to sit on a cushion with your legs crossed or folded beneath you. On a chair, sit without leaning back with your feet planted evenly and comfortably on the floor. Sit comfortably erect with shoulders back and your spine straight. Rock back and forth, and then side to side to find your center. Your head should also be straight with your eyelids lowered, but not closed. Focus on a point a few feet in front of you. Your face should be relaxed as you breathe quietly. Hands can be placed in several positions. In the classic mode, rest your left hand in your right hand, with thumbs touching and comfortably laid against your abdomen. Or you can touch thumbs and forefingers together and rest them on your thighs with palms up. Another option may be to fold your hands on top of each other on your lap. The key is to find a position that is comfortable and that can be maintained in stillness during the meditation session. While sitting, try focusing on your breath, counting them to 10. Breathe in, 1. Breathe out, 2. Breathe in, 3, and so forth. You may find distractions, such as the sounds around you or your own thoughts. If that happens, observe them, acknowledge them, and then let them go. Begin counting your breaths again from 1. We will begin and end each session at the sound of a bell. At the end of this first session, you will be asked to place your hands together in gassho and bow. Gassho means putting your hands together and bowing in an expression of gratitude. You may choose to intone the words Namo Amida Butsu as you gassho. We will begin our first seated meditation session at the sound of the bell. So you just experienced the first 5 minutes of a meditation session. And if you go to the Weekly Wheel podcast, you will see many more. There are other episodes. They vary somewhat. They're all kind of unique. And there's usually always a Dharma talk, but they are configured differently. And I saw that Jim came in. Jim Scott, can you stand, please? This is Jim Scott. He is the person that has put the Weekly Wheel together, and I think we owe him an applause. He has meticulously put together all of these podcasts. He is just meticulous in every detail and has done a fabulous job. So we have a lot to thank him for. And a while ago, I haven't checked with him recently, but he said in 1 week he had something like 400 people coming to the podcast. I don't know if that has numbers increased. You can ask him yourself. But we are reaching out to others beyond the four walls of OCBC with things like the Weekly Wheel, things like our online school, which you all know about and hopefully are clicking on and taking. And Reverend John said that we passed our 500th subscriber recently. So we're getting some traction, and hopefully we will continue to extend Shin to everyone else. We're really excited about this. Thank you for listening.